wedding film photographer based in San Diego. Today's video was requested by one of you in the comments, and it was on timelines and how much time to allocate for each portion of the day. And I love that question because I work very closely with the couples that hire me in order to make sure that their timeline is really great for photos, because that is one of my clients' top priorities. I've never had a client book me who didn't prioritize photography as like their top thing. I think that the clients who find me are just really, really obsessed with photos, and they want them to be the best they can be, so they always defer to me for how much time to spread throughout the day. So I will work with their planner to make sure we get the best that we can possibly fit. So on that note, I am going to be going through the timeline first of how I would do it with a first look, and then I will go back through it with a wedding with no first look. I think I'm going to redo the video I made a couple of years ago on first looks because my opinions have gotten a little bit stronger since then. I highly recommend them. I think they're fantastic for so many reasons. The origin of why the bride and groom used to not see each other before the wedding is actually not good. It's because in arranged marriages, they did not want each other scaring each other off based on their looks. So they didn't want to have the couple see each other until it was too late to do anything about it. It's really not the best tradition in the world, so if you are a traditional person, maybe knowing the root of why bride and grooms didn't see each other beforehand, maybe that will like change your mind. If not, that's totally fine. You do you, but I just think they're great because all of my couples have always given me excellent feedback on having done them. Even some that were on the fence, and I'm never going to push anybody to do it, but if they're on the fence, I'm going to make my case for their particular day, what I think is going to work best. If they have a winter wedding in Palm Springs where the sun sets really early, and especially early because of the mountains, I'm really going to suggest that we do a first look. Otherwise, you're going to have no time for portraits before it gets dark. And although I can shoot with flash and do portraits at night, it's not the look that people hire me for. So it's my job to tell them what will happen based on their decisions. And then if they're okay with those consequences, that's totally fine. I'm on a huge tangent here. Anyway, I recommend them. You don't have to do it, whatever. I'm going to give you guys timelines for both scenarios. I create timelines so often that I actually made a really cool Excel like formula thing where it's all set up based on the time I want. So all I have to do is plug in the person's ceremony time, and it automatically puts out all the times that I would actually want. And so it makes my job really faster. So I'm going to be referencing that. Let's say that your ceremony is at 6 p.m. That is the sample time I have chosen. It probably means you're having a summer wedding. I want to arrive to the bride's room at 2:15 at the latest, okay? So what I'm going to be doing in that time, I'm going to be spending about an hour photographing her details. Now that might seem like a long time, but it does take time to style beautiful flat lays. I don't throw these together in 2 seconds because good flat lays take time. I love to spend a lot of moments kind of re-changing things and styling different pieces, making sure everything works to create a beautiful story within one frame. So I'm working on invitations, rings, shoes, veil, gown, all of these details, and these are really important to my brides. If that's not important to you, that's fine. I'm just talking about what I do today. So I will usually spend about an hour doing that. I'll get some candids in between shooting details if I'm done a little bit early. And then after an hour, so at 3:15, I want her hair and makeup complete. It is about 50 minutes until the first look. So that's how much time I want her hair and makeup to be done by. Now this assumes that you're not traveling. This assumes you're getting ready at the same location as your wedding, or it's a really short drive. If you're traveling, you have to put in padding for that, but everybody's travel time is going to be different, so I can't really do that. So I'm just going to be keeping on with somebody who is really, really close to their ceremony site. So I want her getting into her dress after 30 minutes past hair and makeup completion. That gives my bride time to use the restroom, get her things together. I put padding in here because if hair and makeup runs late, I don't want us to have to get out the door in 2 seconds. I want time. I always pad the timeline. It is so good to do that because you never know what's going to run late, and if things run late, your photos are what get cut short. They're not going to adjust the ceremony time, so we might lose out all of that photo time. So that's just something to keep in mind. I've given her about, let's see, 20 minutes to get into the gown. We're going to take some beautiful photos of that. If you want those photos of you, zipping, buttoning, tying, like with all of your bridesmaids or with your mother or your sister, that is the time to do this. So after about 20 minutes, it's going to be 4:05 p.m. and we are going to be doing the first look. I always tell my couples, take as much time as you want for the moments of the first look, and when you're ready, you tell me, and then we'll start more of the posed portraits. So I typically like to have about 45 minutes for that. Usually we'll do sunset portraits later, which I'll talk about in a bit, but I want at least 45 minutes of first look and portraits. That gives me enough time to get more than the standard shots. We can get really creative. We can do different locations. We can do a lot of different poses and have a lot of different dynamic emotional moments and a lot of candids in there as well. I am not the person who takes only posed portraits with zero emotion. I want lots of emotion. I want laughter. I want real moments in there. I need time to make that happen. Time is so important. I cannot achieve all of that in 5 minutes, okay? In 5 minutes, if that's all you give your photographer, you're gonna get a couple smiling at the camera shots, maybe a few kissing shots, and that's it. They're not gonna have time to do a bunch of different things, okay? So if your photographer says, I need more time for this, and they're explaining why, understand if that's something that's important to you, you need to give them more time, okay? At about 4:50, so 45 minutes later, I want to do the bridal party portraits. Now this is a part of the day that I might adjust based on how big the bridal party is. What I typically have allocated is about 30 minutes. For an average size bridal party, which in California is probably about 6 and 6 on each side, in the South it's probably like 12 and 12 on each side. But for an average size bridal party where we are here, 30 minutes is usually enough time for me to get the full group and to get all the ladies, all the men, and then each bridesmaid with the bride, same with the grooms. Sometimes my second shooter will do the grooms and I will just do the girls, and that's kind of what we do. We'll split it up, but sometimes I'll shoot it all if I have the time, and they can side shoot and get cute in between moments. If you have a really teeny tiny bridal party, like 2 and 2 on each side, you might be able to make this a little bit shorter, but I always think leaving in an extra time is better than cutting it out. Now, if you have a very large bridal party, like more than 9 on each side, I would probably recommend maybe even adding in 40 to 45 minutes. The better your bridal party listens and pays attention, the faster this will go. If they're all drunk or not listening or being rowdy, it's gonna take so much longer to get their attention, get them back in the right spot, and you lose out on pictures. So make sure if you've got a large bridal party or an unruly crowd, be sure to prep them ahead of time. Say, we would really appreciate it if you guys would really pay attention. It'll make it go faster and you can get to the bar quicker. Who doesn't want that? So after about 30 minutes of bridal party, it is 5:20 p.m. Okay, that's when I want to start the family photos. I personally like to do the family photos before the ceremony with a first look. Some people will do them after. I find that my couples like to get as many photos done as possible. That way, right after the ceremony, they don't have to go immediately pose. They can go join the party. They can go take a break by themselves for a few minutes. I think that they really love that because they tell me they do, but it's really nice to do that. But sometimes we can't because of logistics. Some people aren't arriving yet. That's totally fine. But typically for family photos, I will allocate about 20 minutes. Now, I have a whole video on family photos. I don't know how old it is, but anyways, my rule of thumb is that each grouping takes 2 to 3 minutes. If you have a massive group of like 25 people, that's gonna take even longer. If you hand your photographer a list of 30 groupings, that is going to take you a really long time. And if you're okay with spending that time, that's fine. Don't be upset if you're standing there for an hour in the same spot while your family changes in and out and you're super tired of it. So just know that. I always say 2 to 3 minutes per grouping. I recommend personally to my clients that they try to keep it under 10 groupings, and that's almost always the case. Maybe twice a year we have more than that, and that's totally fine. It's just my suggestion based on how I know my brides are going to feel on the wedding day, but if they want more, that's fine. And for family photos, I do want a list of people. Most of my couples don't really do extended family other than grandparents. They just want to do the core family members, and that's great because you can get candid pictures during cocktail hour, or you can grab the photographer like, hey, can you get a photo of us real quick of your extended family? I find that works really well. Then you don't have as many people to coordinate and it is less stressful for the bride and groom. I've seen this with my own 2 eyes. I find that they feel better if it's a more manageable list. After family photos, it's now 5:40, ceremony starts at 6. I always want my couples and their family to have at least 20 minutes of a break between photos and the ceremony. Gives them time to use the restroom, take a breather, get ready. So at 6 p.m. is now the ceremony. Most of my ceremonies last like 15 to 20 minutes, but we typically will allot 30 minutes. If you have a Catholic wedding, it's usually gonna be an hour. That's what they set. I don't set that time. That is all up to the couple, their officiant, whatever. So at 6:30, that's when cocktail hour begins. If we have not completed all of the family photos, then at that point in time, we will finish them up, and then I will typically send the couple off and they will go join cocktail hour. Depending on what time of the year it is, sunset photos might be, I don't know, like 6:45 for this example. I might pull them back out right before the reception begins, but typically I will try to fit in 10 to 15 minutes of sunset portraits, and that is solely based on the time that the sun sets. So sometimes the timeline makes difficulties for that. We will try to work around them. Sometimes I might want to shoot 30 minutes before sunset starts just to make it work with the planner's idea of the timeline, or sometimes we get it right at 15 minutes before sunset. That is my happy place. If it was an 8-hour timeline, I've arrived at 2:15, I'm leaving at 10:15. It is not super common for me to stay to the end of my weddings. Here in California, there are so many restrictions on not being able to do sparklers, not being able to do rice or bubbles or anything. And most of my couples don't really want a lot of repetitive dancing shots because people do start to look a little sloppy towards the end of the night, whether it's from alcohol or simply sweating because they've been dancing so much. So I know that my couples are typically happy to have the camera go away by that point in time. Most people don't really care about having their exit photographed or aren't even having an exit anyway. If you want an exit photographed but you don't want your photographer to stay till the end, sometimes you can do a mock exit. You just have to make sure that your guests know it's not the end of the night, so it has to have a good flow in the timeline. But you can have everybody stand outside and you guys can pretend to do your little exit if you want those photos. And people think it's really fun anyway. It's like, it doesn't have to signify that you're leaving. It can just be like a fun thing that happens. So that is a timeline for weddings with a first look. Now the no first look, I'm gonna go through a lot faster. So if you are not having a first look, here is your timeline. For no first look, things are going to be fairly different on the front end, not as different on like the end of the evening. So for the same ceremony time, 6 p.m., I am actually arriving at 3:40 instead of 2:15 because we don't have to fit everything beforehand, so I will be arriving later. 4:40, that's when hair and makeup is complete. I've already shot all the details. You guys know what happens then. And then after about 30 minutes, I'm gonna have the bride get into her gown. We're gonna be doing what I refer to as bridal party separates. That is the bride with all of the bridesmaids. Somewhere else on the property, the groom and all of his groomsmen are going to be doing their portraits. So because we are getting at least that out of the way, I save my couples time from doing that after the ceremony so that they have more time for bride and groom portraits. And if you're not doing a first look, I hate to say it, but you're not really gonna get much time for bride and groom portraits unless you wanna do an hour-and-a-half cocktail hour. Most people don't want to do that. Now, if you were having a church wedding where your ceremony time has to be in the morning and there's a huge break, then you've got tons of time, and that's not really a concern whatsoever. If you choose not to see each other beforehand, you have to know that you won't have as much time for bride and groom portraits, especially if it's the winter and there's not a separate point in time where you can go out for sunset portraits because the sun might be setting right at the end of your cocktail hour anyway. So the time you are doing your bride and groom portraits, that basically is your sunset portrait time. So just know these things, and if you're okay with that, that's totally fine. If you ultimately decide, I really do want a lot more bride and groom portraits, then maybe consider doing the first look. So I want to be doing the bridal party separates for about 15 minutes. And that's going to give me enough time to get those group and those individual shots of just the ladies. If you've got a massive bridal party, we might have to add on more time. Because I'm not having to do the groomsmen and the bridesmaids like all in the same amount of time, my second shooter can handle the guys. I'm just with the girls, it doesn't take that much time. And then basically what I want, again, 5:40, you're going to break before your ceremony. You're going to have all that time you need to recharge. Now your ceremony is ending around 6:30. That's when cocktail hour starts. That's when I'm going to start the family portraits. I like to get family done first, especially if there's any older family members who can't really be standing around that long. 15 minutes is typically what we'll do, and then at 6:45 we will do the bridal party large group. So all the guys and girls, we usually get a couple of formal ones, then I might get some that are a little bit more candid, maybe walking shots if we have time, there's not too many people. But that I'm typically wanting to spend about 10 minutes on because again, we've already done the separate groups and all the individuals. So I really only need 10 minutes with all of the guys and girls to make it work, trying to prioritize the bride and groom portraits, which I'm hoping to do by about 6:55, and then that we are going to have about 35 minutes for. That is not a terrible amount of time. It's not a whole lot, but I can make a good bit of stuff work in 35 minutes. Now again, the more family photos you have, the less time you're gonna have for bride and groom portraits. 7:30, that's when your reception is going to begin. You're gonna do all that you wanna do, and then at 11:40, I would be leaving because I arrived at 3:40 on an 8-hour timeline. So I hope that this was easy for you guys to follow. Know that every photographer is different. Some photographers might want more time than I do. Some might want less time. So just know that whatever they're asking for, even if it's not the same as what I have said, that's what they need. Now, if you do have traveling in your wedding, you're gonna have to pad your timeline. You might need your photographer for a 9th hour or a 10th hour. That's just something to keep in mind, or you're gonna have to scrape off of that getting ready time or scrape off more of the reception. Typically, I am leaving the reception after the last event, whether that's cake cutting or bouquet toss, which I don't really do many of those anymore, but typically it's the cake cutting or whatever sort of dance that they're doing. I will typically leave after that. If you have any questions on this, feel free to ask them below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!